Oregon fans, what's going on? How's everybody living? It is Monday, January 30th, 2023. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. Just in case you're new here, I'm your host, Max Torres, publisher and lead editor of Ducks Digest, covering the Oregon Ducks over on Fan Nation, part of the Sports Illustrated Network. Like I said, thank you guys for tuning in to today's show. We are coming to you live on two convenient locations. First of all, on Twitter, at mtorresports is where you can find me. Make sure to lock in with me on all social media platforms to follow all my Oregon Ducks football coverage. And you can also find us live on YouTube at Oregon Football. Max Torres is where we are streaming today's show. If you are here in the live chat, go ahead and throw a comment in the comment section in the live chat. Let me know what you think about Oregon football recruiting and the newest commitment who we are going to talk all about in today's episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. A couple other reminders, make sure you hit that like button. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the YouTube channel and then subscribe to the show. You can find us, the Ducks Dish podcast, on your podcasting platform of choice, and especially Apple Podcasts and Spotify. With all that being said, let's hop right into today's show. We are talking about the newest addition for Dan Lanning in the Oregon Ducks football team. That is 2024 edge rusher Jaxson Jones. Jaxson Jones commits to Oregon following a visit to Eugene over the weekend. Just to give you a little bit more background on him as a prospect, he is listed as a 3-star recruit on the 247 Sports Composite at .8604, the number 544 player nationally, the number 35 edge rusher, and the number 9 player in Arizona. He measures in at 6'3", 230 pounds, and has really made a name for himself lately as one of the top defensive prospects in the entire state of Arizona. So today we're going to go ahead and break down this commitment, talk about what it means for Oregon. We're going to look at some tape, look at some film. If you are here on YouTube, that's always a nice little place to check us out, so you can get that multi-platform excellence and see some of that film that I just mentioned. So let's go ahead and talk about Jaxson Jones, talk about what he brings to the table as a player, how he could impact Oregon, and then a little bit about what's next maybe for Oregon on the recruiting trail, both in the 2023 class and in the 2024 class. As we know, we are quickly approaching National Signing Day again, the more traditional signing period, which starts on Wednesday, February 1st. Oregon's still working to add a couple of big pieces to their 2023 recruiting class. So let's go ahead and hop into it. Let's get the tape up on the screen of Jaxson Jones. Jaxson Jones is from Yuma, Arizona, and plays his high school football at Yuma Catholic High School. We got the junior season tape on display right now, and this is what we are going to break down in terms of what the Ducks are getting in their latest commit. So like I said, 6'3", 230 pounds, really definitely kind of shines as a true edge rusher kind of body type, kind of frame. And talking about when you want to talk about production, I think Jaxson Jones brings you a whole lot of proven production from the high school level. Looking at his junior stats, I think it's right around the area of 17 or 18 sacks as a junior and 22 tackles for loss, which I think is a really important stat because it shows you that not only is he getting in the backfield to affect the pass game, affect the quarterback, but he can also help you defend the run, which we know is super, super important. And Dan Lanning is really looking like he's going to be, finding some of his identity in these Oregon teams in the trenches. We know that the Oregon football team has been one that has identified itself in the trenches under previous coaches like Mario Cristobal on the offensive line. But I think that Dan Lanning, Tosh Lupoi, and the rest of this defensive staff can really set Oregon up for success both now and in the future by finding that identity in the defensive trenches, and adding edge rusher talents is so, so crucial. Looking a little bit more at just kind of what Jaxson Jones presents physically, according to his huddle, he runs a 4.540. So that kind of just gives you a good little insight into what kind of an athlete that he is. And that's probably part of the reason that one of the traits that stands out the most to me when looking at his film is that he's fast off the line, very, very fast off the line, which is typically the characteristic that you kind of want to be seen the most in your edge rushers, right? I think he's got good hands. He's not just purely relying on athleticism, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on in the breakdown. And there's also a play, I don't know if it's already passed, that stood out to me, and I think it just kind of it showed a little bit of his football IQ and just kind of what he is as a football player, and that is that he doesn't give up on a play when he over penetrates. There was a play that stuck out. It was definitely earlier on in the tape when he over penetrated, and he also kind of got taken out and blocked a little bit by the left tackle, but he was able to keep his eyes on the quarterback and then kind of redirect the play and get back involved and really kind of get the quarterback down at the line of scrimmage. So I thought that was a great play to see from Jaxson Jones. And another thing that is a really big positive in Jaxson Jones's game is that he's got great straight line speed and pursuit. Talked about that 4.5 40 time, and I think that speed really shows up when he is defending the run for Yuma Catholic. When you see these running backs getting involved in these maybe outside zone, inside zone plays, coming out of the shotgun, and they're trying to get wide and get around the tight end, get around the side, he's able to just dart down the line of scrimmage, and more often than not, he's bringing these guys down for losses behind the line of scrimmage, which is obviously a big, big plus. I think another thing that stands out and is worth mentioning about Jaxson Jones, and like I said, I'm trying to get better at eval and, breaking these guys down, talking about their strength, not only their strengths, but also their weaknesses. So maybe this comes off as a little bit of a slight, but I think one thing that Jaxson Jones, that about his game is that sometimes he relies a little bit too much on arm tackling and using his upper body. I'm not saying it's all the time, but I think there were a couple plays where that kind of stood out to me when I was trying to analyze his game. And I think part of that comes with him just being so athletic. So oftentimes you can win with athleticism, and maybe even sometimes athleticism alone at the high school level. So maybe Jaxson Jones is a guy that could be better served to add some more pass rushing moves and kind of refine that toolbox, because he seems like he wins a lot with his athleticism, which isn't bad. But when you get to the college level, that's obviously something that is much harder to do because the level of athlete that you're going against, just on average, is so much higher than the high school level. That being said, it's not like Jaxson Jones is going against some low level competition. I think that Arizona is a state that cycle after cycle just keeps putting out more high quality college football talent, right? We saw Oregon have 3 signees from the state of Arizona in 2023: Cole Martin, Mikel Gardner, and Amari Washington. So it looks like Jaxson Jones is the latest in the line of front 7 guys to commit to Oregon, joining the likes of Amari Washington and Mikel Gardner. So he definitely has some tape that I think really stands out, and just seeing him move, it's really impressive to see how well he carries his weight, and his athleticism definitely stands out as one of his strongest traits. And one of my last points that I had on Jaxson Jones is that maybe this strikes me as a guy who can improve his stock with a solid senior season and maybe end up getting to that 4-star status, because that's not something that he currently has. Let's go ahead and bring that page up now that we got through the film and just kind of show you guys what I'm seeing. So here's his 247 Sports recruiting profile. That says 6'3", 215, but I've seen some other places that he's listed at 6'3", 230 pounds. And then here's the composite, and it looks like the 247 ranking is a little more favorable, has him closer to that 4-star status, which you usually see around 89 or 90. So I don't think that it's too crazy to think that that he could end up becoming a 4-star prospect with a really solid senior season. And like you said, the production is something that is obviously really, really encouraging when you're looking at his body of work and kind of what you're looking at with this newest pickup for the Ducks. Now let's talk a little bit about kind of how this recruitment unfolded for Jaxson Jones, because it's a little interesting. I want to say it was earlier on last week, he announced that he would be decommitting from Washington, and then he ended up taking this visit to Oregon over the weekend, and the Ducks were quick to seal the deal, getting a commitment on Sunday morning. So that makes you feel like that was probably a guy that the Ducks felt pretty good about for at least a while. And this isn't some low-level defender that they're picking up, because he had 15 reported scholarship offers from the likes of some pretty decent schools. Obviously, Washington had a good year last year, beat Oregon. Definitely has been known for their defense. Also had Braylon Trice last year shine as one of the top edge rushers in all of college football. But Jaxson Jones was also offered by Michigan, Notre Dame, USC, Utah, another really good defensive program. So for Oregon to be able to get wins over the likes of those schools, even with some Pac-12 schools, especially like USC and Utah, I think that tells you a little bit more about what kind of a pickup Oregon's getting and why this is a notable addition for Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks. And then zooming out a little bit to look at Oregon's 2024 recruiting class, they now have the number 7 class according to the 247 Sports rankings, and they only have 5 commits. So obviously, you're still kind of getting things rolling a little bit, building that class, generating some momentum to try to get more guys to hop on board. But we are pretty much right on that little, precipice of flipping to the 2024 class once we get through Wednesday. Most, if not all, of Oregon's 2023 recruiting targets will have already made their decisions. So looking at Oregon's 2024 class, you obviously have Jaxson Jones as the newest addition. He's actually the lowest rated commit in the class, but I don't think that's a bad thing right now, given how early it is. Oregon's 2024 recruiting class is headlined by Long Beach Millikan wide receiver Jordan Anderson, who committed to the Ducks right after I guess it was during the early signing period. That was back in December. And then you have Tyser Denmark, the Philadelphia wide receiver, another high-level 4-star. And then you kind of go closer to home in the Northwest, looking at one of the top in-state prospects in North Medford tight end A.J. Pugliano, and also looking at one of the better offensive linemen in the Northwest in Fox Crater out of Evergreen High School in Vancouver. So Oregon's 2024 class is absolutely off to a very quick start. And it's a top class in the Pac-12 rankings. I'm looking right now at the page, and the next Pac-12 school is actually Colorado at number 19 with 3 commits so far as it stands. So Oregon's 2024 class is off to a good start. Jaxson Jones gets the ball rolling a little bit on defense, which is definitely going to be something that Oregon needs to prioritize in the 2024 class. That said, I still think that edge rusher is going to be a major need for Oregon in the 2024 class. Even though they signed a bunch of edge guys in the 2023 recruiting class, you can never have enough difference makers. You can never have enough freak athlete type of guys coming off the edge of your defense. And that was clearly an area that Oregon was lacking in during the 2022 season. During the 2023 recruiting cycle, the Ducks were able to add, like I said, a lot of solid pieces along the at the edge position, headlined, of course, by Mateo Uiagalelei from Bellflower St. John Bosco. The Adidas All-American edge rusher was really, really solid for the Braves all year. Was hoping to see him in San Antonio, but he ended up enrolling earlier than that and got to Eugene to start off his career at the University of Oregon before the All-American Bowl in San Antonio. A couple other edge guys you're looking at, Ashton Porter out of the state of Texas. He is definitely another big body on the edge. Oregon winning out there over the likes of Michigan State was definitely a big contender in that recruitment. Mississippi State, Houston was also in the picture. Ashton Porter, a former Northwestern commit. And then you're looking at another high-level player in Blake Purchase out of the state of Colorado. And he was a letter of intent that was a little bit slow coming in. And the main reason for that is because Deion Sanders and the Colorado Buffaloes were giving him something to think about and really pushing for a flip late in the 2023 recruiting cycle. But you got him signed. He's a special talent, a guy that I'm really, really high on, and someone that I know Oregon thinks can possibly contribute early once he gets to Eugene. That's, of course, Blake Purchase. And then a guy who's already in Eugene, you have someone who's from right up the road at Sheldon High School, Tatum Tuioti, the younger son of Oregon defensive line coach Tony Tuioti. So he really solidified himself as one of the best players in the state of Oregon. I think he actually might have been the number one player when all was said and done. I'm going to check on that right now on the back end on my other screen. But Tatum Tuioti was a guy that I, the first when I saw he committed, I was like, okay, this is a coach's son. But I want to see what he really has to offer in terms of players and kind of how skilled he really is, and he really just improved his stock, continued to raise his stock with a really strong senior season. He was the number 2 player in the state. The number 1 player in the state was West Linn quarterback Sam Levitt, who committed to Michigan State. And then another edge guy that's already in Oregon enrolled, we saw him at the basketball game on Saturday night, was Jaden Moore from the state of California as well. So there's a lot of really good pieces for Oregon so far in at the edge spot, right? I think I mentioned all of them. Let me see if I'm missing anybody. Talked about Tatum. Talked about Blake Purchase. Yeah, and then obviously you have to talk about Jordan Burch, the big-time transfer coming over from South Carolina. That's a huge addition for Oregon. Certainly a guy that the coaching staff views as a plug-and-play type of guy. Someone that I think has a high floor and a high ceiling. Maybe he's a guy who just needed to get under a new coaching staff to really take his game to the next level. We know that he had a solid relationship with Dan Lanning, and that Lanning, has a track record of developing guys along the defensive line. And then Tosh Lupoi certainly has a strong reputation as well. Now they're both entering year 2 in Eugene on the same staff with a really good feel for their roster. So there's reason to believe that they can really take this defensive front to the next level, particularly at the edge rusher spot. And all of these guys that are coming in are going to be able to learn from an experienced guy like Jordan Burch, from someone who's played a ton of football at Oregon, like Mace Funa, who comes back for another season with the Ducks. Trevin Mae is another guy who's played a lot of football. So I think you have a good mixture of proven production at the edge spot and some new faces that you're adding to the mix. So as far as 2024 goes, we're talking about the importance of edge rushers, right? Oregon still has a lot of really talented edge rushers that they're going after. And there was one of them that I wanted to talk about on this show as far as kind of what's next in 2024 for Oregon and some of the other guys they're looking at. Let's just focus on the state of Arizona for a little bit, because I talked about how important the state of Arizona has been for the Oregon Ducks, for the Oregon football program. It's a state that's just putting out more guys each year, 3 of them last year. But who are the other names to know for the Ducks in the 2024 class recruiting the state of Arizona? I think that it really starts with the biggest name in the entire country, what many view as the number 1 player in the country, and that is Dylan Raiola out of Chandler High School. He's the number 1 player in the country across most recruiting services, number 1 quarterback. He was just on a visit out to USC out here in the Los Angeles area over the weekend. So Lincoln Riley and the Trojans able to sneak in a last-minute visit before the start of the recruiting dead period in the month of February. But Oregon, we know from what Raiola has said, Oregon is one of 4 schools that have emerged as serious contenders in that recruitment, but Oregon's got a whole lot of competition there, right? You have the Ducks, you have Nebraska, where Raiola's father played, you have Georgia, who I think is getting a lot of recruiting momentum for Dylan Raiola after winning back-to-back national titles. Raiola was in Los Angeles to watch Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs take home another national championship. And then you also have USC, who's in the mix as well for Dylan Raiola, the former Ohio State Buckeyes commit. And I think that depending on when he makes his commitment, it doesn't sound like he's in too much of a rush right now. Depending on when he makes his commitment, we could see that serve as a major domino for the quarterback position in the 2024 recruiting class. And Oregon's gotta get a really good quarterback in the 2024 class, because as you know, I've talked about it a bunch of times on this show, Oregon's quarterback recruiting has been pretty inconsistent over the past couple of years, or maybe just their management of the quarterback position, maybe a little bit of an over-reliance on the transfer portal. But nonetheless, Bo Nix is back for another year at Oregon, and that is a great thing for Dan Lanning, for new offensive coordinator Will Stein. And you bring in Austin Novosad from the 2023 recruiting class. Great situation for him, a young guy from Texas that's going to be learning under one of the best quarterbacks in college football, Bo Nix, who is likely headed to the NFL in 2024. So Dylan Raiola is a big name to know out of Arizona. One of a handful of guys I'm going to be talking about here in this episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. We got a little bit of a LaCroix here on the show, key lime to be specific. I would love to be sipping on a Snapple right now, but I have not had a Snapple in quite some time. But shout out to key lime LaCroix, definitely a solid beverage. All right. Next guy I'm going to be talking about out of the state of Arizona that you've got to know for Oregon recruiting is Elijah Rushing. Elijah Rushing is one of the top edge rushers in the 2024 recruiting class. Depending on which service you're looking at, 247 has him as the number 1 edge rusher, number 3 edge rusher in the 247 Sports Composite. This is a guy that already has 34 reported offers, 6'6", 235 pounds. Good news for Oregon is that he has already visited multiple times, and this is a guy that they're in a great spot with, but obviously plenty of competition for Oregon when they're pursuing a guy like Elijah Rushing. I actually think he released some top schools not too long ago, so I'm trying to scramble and get up his Twitter account so I can fill you guys in on that one. Let's see here. What else do we got? And some recruits tweet a whole lot, and some really don't even tweet that much, which is really surprising. Okay, Elijah Rushing is working from a top 12 right now. It's a loaded group. You got Arizona, Notre Dame, Florida, Georgia, USC, Miami, Tennessee, Michigan, Michigan State, UCLA, and Washington. Elijah Rushing took a trip out to Oregon for the Washington game, I want to say. I believe it was the Washington game, and then he dropped his top 12 schools right after that visit. So obviously Oregon's in a great spot there with Elijah Rushing. And then he took a recent trip out to Washington for the Huskies Junior Day. Like I said, the Huskies definitely have one of the better defenses typically, at least historically, in the Pac-12. But Elijah Rushing is one of the very, very top guys on Oregon's big board in the 2024 recruiting class out of the state of Arizona, coming out of Tucson, Sal Point Catholic, Sal Pointe. I think it's Sal Point Catholic, but he's a huge name. Definitely a guy that you have to know. Let's see who else we got. 2 more names here. One of them is running back Christian Clark out of Mountain Point in the Phoenix area. He's a pretty highly sought after running back, and he was just on campus over the weekend for a visit to the University of Oregon. My laptop is being super weird. Just taking me to my analytics page, which I wasn't even looking for. But Christian Clark, let's talk a little bit about him, kind of try to bring you guys up to speed on kind of where he's at in his recruitment, because he's definitely seeing a lot of schools hop on board here lately. So here's Christian Clark. Going to share my screen, posting some pictures from a weekend trip out to the University of Oregon in Eugene. Here he is in Autzen Stadium with head coach Dan Lanning. Some of these pictures are a little bit blurry, it looks like. Here he is with running backs coach Carlos Laughlin. And then he's on the throne with the cape and the crown, just having himself a good time. And then posing with some of the great art that they have over at the University of Oregon in the athletic department. But here's his recruiting page. He's not even rated by the 247 Sports recruiting website, but you can see there he has 22 offers to his name right now. Georgia, Florida State, obviously Oregon has offered, Tennessee, Texas, both the LA schools. So Christian Clark is a name to keep an eye on in the 2024 recruiting class. But the Ducks also do have a number of other highly touted prospects they're recruiting at the running back spot. You're talking about Nate Frazier out of Mater Dei in Santa Ana. You're talking about Jason Brown Jr. out of the Seattle area at O'Day High School. one of the best programs in the state of Washington. But we know that the state of Arizona has been kind to Oregon, so Christian Clark is another name to know. The final guy that I'm going to be talking about out of the state of Arizona that you need to keep an eye on for Oregon is 2024 quarterback Luke Moga. Luke Moga, I think it's Moga. He's out of the Phoenix area, Sunny Slope High School. Only rated a 3-star prospect, but he is someone who has been really, really picking up a lot of momentum on the recruiting trail with some recent offers. He was on campus in Oregon not too long ago, also made it out to Oregon State, Arizona, I want to say, Miami as well. But Luke Moga is a guy that I know Oregon's recruiting staff is very high on in the 2024 class. A number of really talented quarterbacks the Ducks are also pursuing, looking at Mater Dei's Elijah Brown. You're looking at St. Francis Academy's Michael Van Buren, who was recently on campus. So those are some big names. Austin Mack is another guy who has Oregon in his top schools out of Folsom in Northern California. I believe he's announcing his commitment later this week. Washington looks like they're the favorite there right now for the Folsom quarterback. So I like to kind of look at some of the guys out west as more realistic options for Oregon. But we know that this staff has a national reach, as I just mentioned, with Austin Novosad in the 2024 recruiting class. 2023 recruiting class, excuse me. Let's see what else we have in the comment section as we kind of start to wind the episode down a little bit. Andrew says, body-wise reminds me of Troy Dye, lanky, speedy pass rusher. Yeah, Troy Dye was one of the more interesting, guys to come through the state of Oregon and play for the Ducks in recent years. Troy Dye was a former safety, so maybe not exactly the same type of deal. I think he was probably a little more athletic than Jaxson Jones is right now, but Troy Dye was kind of a similar mold, right? 6'4", 220, 230. So I can see some of that. I don't know if I would categorize Troy Dye as a pass rusher, but I could see some of the similarities right there. Shadow Faction 24 likes what he sees with this latest commitment, saying it's a great pickup. Let's see here. Christopher asked a great question. Any update on Harbor's visit / commitment? Yeah, I just posted a story over on Ducks Digest about an updated commitment date and time for Nicholas Harbor. He's going to be announcing his college commitment on Wednesday, right around 10 a.m. Pacific. I believe that's probably going to be on social media, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was streamed somewhere, CBS, YouTube, just because he is the top uncommitted prospect in the entire country. But based on what I've been able to gather a little bit, talking to some sources, is that the visit went really well. He and his family looked like they had an awesome time during the trip. I'm going to go ahead and pull up some photos here to show you guys kind of what the visit looked like. So here you go. Let me see if I can make the post a little bit bigger. Here's Nicholas Harbor starting things off with some really fresh photos. He's in the track uniform at Hayward Field in Eugene. So this is the top target still on the board for the Ducks in 2024. 2023, I keep getting my years mixed up. Sorry about that. But here he is, mixing in football and track photos. This is just an absolute freak athlete is the best way to describe him. I think he's been described as the freakiest athlete in the 2023 recruiting class in the entire country. Just crazy speed. And, I think Oregon really did pull out all the stops for him on this recruiting visit, rolling out the red carpet. Here he is with Dan Lanning and Junior Adams. Got to spend some time with Phil Knight and Tinker Hatfield as well on that visit. I also heard that during the visit he got to mock up, a shoe design with some of the Oregon folks. So they're doing all they can to make this happen with Harbor, and it certainly bodes well for the Ducks that they get the final official visit, and then the subsequent news comes out that he's going to be announcing his commitment right after the visit. I'm not saying this is a done deal by any means, but this is certainly a commitment that looks like it is trending in Oregon's way. But still some heavy hitters in the recruiting this recruitment that Oregon is going up against. Looking at Michigan, Maryland, and South Carolina. South Carolina coming off a great year. I know that he's spoken highly about that program and being really close with the number of commits in that class. But hey, and then Maryland, I believe, is the alma mater of both of his parents. But when it comes down to it, this is a track guy. He wants to do track and football. Oregon can offer him an opportunity in track that no other school can match. At least no other school that he is being recruited by right now. Like when you put Oregon up against the other schools track wise, I think it's got to be Oregon. They're going to win that battle when we're just looking at track. So being an Olympian, being in that Nike family, I think that those are things that carry a ton of weight, and particularly in Harbor's commitment. So I'm feeling pretty good about where Oregon stands with Nicholas Harbor heading into his commitment on Wednesday. We're gonna have to see how that one shakes out. I'll probably have a prediction story out before too long on Nicholas Harbor. Appreciate the question. Josh T says, I do agree a bit of over-reliance on the portal for quarterbacks. Like to see 2024 after the loss of Dante Moore, for UO to line up the ideal development guy. Yeah, and I think that I agree with that too. And there's a bunch of really talented quarterbacks that are still on the board, right? Like I was just discussing. And then let's not forget Ty Thompson is still at Oregon. I think that Ty Thompson is a guy that a lot of people were perhaps expecting to enter the transfer portal once we got into the offseason. But at least as of right now, it looks like he is fairly intent on sticking things out at least for another year, right? Because with Ty Thompson, I think he's an interesting deal because he's never really had the ideal situation, right? Joe Moorhead was one of the best offensive minds before he got to Oregon, and then he was at Oregon, and I don't think that you go from being one of the best play callers and one of the best coaches in the game to suddenly not knowing how to call plays, or your offense just kind of goes to pretty gross, right? I don't think that was all on Joe Moorhead. So he's had a couple of different offensive coordinators, some different head coaches with Cristobal and Lanning, but maybe Stein is just the right guy to really set Ty up for success in the 2024 season. Maybe he'll serve as the primary backup again, and then you have Novosad as your number 3 guy. But I think that's definitely the way to go for Oregon to get a 2024 guy that they can develop, but also maybe get a guy who can compete right away. I don't think that's a prerequisite or something that's super important, but you want to be in the territory of having that kind of a guy. Andrew says, as much as I hope the Ducks get Harbor and Pleasant, it'd be much better if USC doesn't get Deuce Robinson. There's just no one on the Ducks who could cover him. He's another Drake London. Yeah, Deuce Robinson is one of the recruits that we're still tracking very closely as we get to National Signing Day, but he's a recruit that actually is looking at possibly pushing his recruitment past National Signing Day, past those traditional recruiting deadlines, as the number 1 tight end in the 2023 recruiting class out of Pinnacle High School in Arizona. I don't think that Oregon has really been viewed as a serious contender in his recruitment. There's been a little bit of buzz, like back at the Under Armour All-American Bowl in Orlando in December, about him getting out to Oregon for a final official visit, but I think he's just so busy between the Polynesian Bowl, the All-American Bowl, and his baseball schedule. He's also viewed as a top baseball prospect, and he wants to play both sports professionally, I believe is what I've read. So if he does choose to push his recruitment past the traditional recruiting deadlines, maybe that bodes well for Oregon, and they can get him out for another trip, which could help them solidify their standing with him, or just kind of get more in the mix, right? But right now, I think that Georgia is probably viewed as the favorite right now. But yeah, USC is right there in the thick of it as well. Not too far from home out in Arizona. Texas is also a pretty serious contender from what I've been able to read, with Arch Manning as the number 1 quarterback in that class. So Texas is another school to watch as well. But I wouldn't be surprised if Georgia was able to round out their recruiting class in the 2023 cycle with both Deuce Robinson and Walker Lyons, the tight end out of Folsom, California. He is a super, super talented guy, but he got banged up during his senior season, so he hasn't been able to play for quite a while. Otson Zone with another question, asking, if we don't get Pleasant, any chance we get Jaheim Singletary So this is the former Georgia cornerback that entered the transfer portal that a lot of people were buzzing about. I remember I was getting retweets on a really old tweet, and it was his visit, and he tagged me in the picture, and I was wondering why I was getting mentioned, and why my social media was getting some attention because of that tweet. So he's not a name I've heard too much about. It's been a little tough, honestly. I feel like with how busy things have been on the recruiting trail. People don't always get back to you super quickly because there's a lot of stuff going on, right? So I do think, and I have said previously, that Oregon is probably still looking to get another corner in the 2023 recruiting class, whether it be from the transfer portal or from the high school ranks. But I haven't really been hearing any buzz on Singletary in particular, but I appreciate the question. Austin Walker says, I'm very excited to see what's going to happen this year with all of our new additions and the new coaches on staff. Yeah, this is crazy. I was talking about it in the last episode. I think just how much of Oregon's roster they've overhauled. I want to say they are teetering, if not already, at 40 new players in the on the roster after this last year in the era of the transfer portal. You have 10 transfers come in, and then you have 14 guys that have signed their letter of intent. I'm looking at the 247 breakdown, so that's 24 plus another 14. That's 38 guys. 38 guys that are being added to this team, almost half the roster in just one recruiting cycle. So that I think is what Oregon's trying to do, is really bridge the gap between where they are and where they want to be, which I think is going back to the playoff. That's the next step for Oregon. And then you bring in Chris Hampton as your new co-defensive coordinator and your new safeties coach. So it's cool to see some new movement there. Oregon getting the former Tulane defensive coordinator from a year ago. Josh T talking about Nicholas Harbor. Josh T saying Harbor's speed at tight end is going to be bonkers, to be honest. Hopefully the track pulled lands him. Do the Ducks still feel good about Pleasant after no visit? Yeah, I think that was another comment in the live chat talking about there was buzz that we were hearing going to the weekend that Roger Pleasant was going to be visiting Oregon this weekend, which would be a potentially pivotal visit for him heading into this week's decision. He had always been planning on announcing his commitment on February 1st, and I was in Gardena at Unipro-Serra today, and I talked with Roderick Pleasant, and I think that right now it looks like USC really feels good about this recruitment with Roderick Pleasant. I think that him not getting out to Oregon obviously hurts Oregon's chances in this recruitment. But I have a commitment preview over on Ducks Digest that you can read. But I think one thing that was pretty interesting with what Roderick Pleasant had to say was that I asked him, what stands out the most to you about the chance to play at USC? What's most appealing about that opportunity? And it was pretty cut and dry. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's just the reality of it. His response was staying close to home, the ability to stay close to home that USC presents. And he's gotten really close to a number of USC commits in the 2023 recruiting class. He named Zachariah Branch, who's the fastest wide receiver in the 2023 class, also probably going to be a trap guy at USC for the Trojans. And then also mentioned Makai Lemon, the five-star 2023 wide receiver commit, and then Malachi Nelson, the five-star quarterback signee out of Los Alamitos. So he's gotten close to a number of guys at USC. He's another guy like Harbor who wants to be an Olympian. I think the Olympics are coming to LA in 2028, if not 2024. I think 2028. Someone might have to fact check that for me. So I think that maybe him not coming to visit could be I don't want to say the nail in the coffin, but in terms of just how Oregon's chances could potentially take a hit there with Pleasant. William Bryan asking, has Pleasant ever visited? Yeah, Pleasant has been to Oregon numerous times. He did take an official visit out to Oregon, used his official visits at his top 5 schools: Oregon, USC, UCLA, Cal, and Boston College. So UCLA and USC got the most recent visits for Pleasant heading into his decision. Was a busy guy. Was also out in Hawaii for the Polynesian Bowl. Oregon got their official visit with Pleasant in November. He was on scene in Eugene to see the Ducks take down Utah in what was one of the best defensive performances of the year. So he's been to Oregon previously, even before his official visit. I know he was posting pictures with the previous track coach. Oregon did not choose to renew his contract. His name is escaping me. Maybe it's Robert Johnson, but I'm not super in tune with the track scene, so apologies there. But either way, they get a new track coach, and I do know that the track coach was recruiting Roger Pleasant. Obviously, on his official visit, he got to see the track facilities, something he's very familiar with. But Roger Pleasant's going to be one of the two recruits, along with Nicholas Harbor, that we are watching the closest on National Signing Day on Wednesday. I'm going to be in Gardena at Junipero Serra, covering that commitment, boots on the ground, live. So if you guys haven't already, make sure that you follow me on Twitter at Torres Sports to follow the latest recruiting updates that I have for you guys. But that'll do it on this episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. Jaxson Jones is an Oregon Duck. He announced that he would be committing to Oregon and shutting his recruitment down fresh off of his decommitment from the University of Washington. So another big addition for Dan Lanning and the Ducks in 2024, a guy that I think has a tremendous amount of upside and is obviously one of the better defensive talents in the state of Arizona. Talked a little bit about other guys that the Ducks are recruiting in 2024 in the state of Arizona. Certainly going to be a big state for them this recruiting cycle. But if you guys are still here, do me a favor. If you haven't already, like the video and subscribe to my channel, Oregon Football Mac Torres, trying to grow the community and keep connecting with you guys. Love the comments and questions. Love interacting with you guys. So that's the best way you can support the channel. And then do me a favor and share the Ducks Dish podcast with your friends, with your family, with other Duck fans. That's a tremendous help for me and what I'm doing covering the Oregon Ducks. Until next time, you've been listening to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast.